Oh boy. Oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about. Upside is I took notes. So we're gonna do a top 10. Top 10 what the fuck things that happened basically in this episode because man, this is an emotional roller coaster. So, taking it right off the bat. Welcome to Duat, the Egyptian underworld. And I love the way in which the Egyptian underworld looks. Completely unique from anything that we've seen in the MCU, and I'm going to get to a reference that the Egyptian goddess of the dead essentially makes. Remember her name is Taweret, which is the goddess of women, children, and the spirit guides through the underworld, which is essentially when you die, she guides you through the underworld and takes your heart and places it on the scale, takes a feather, places it on the other side, see exactly how it balances out. And if you're evil, you get tossed overboard and your soul gets snatched up by the sand demons. And if you're good, your soul essentially goes to the Egyptian paradise. Jumping forward, number 9. Oh, the Wakandan ancestral plane. Now, I didn't catch this until like my second viewing because I might have been like a little bit distracted, but that is a drop. So essentially, she explains the Wakandan ancestral plane as an intersectional plane of untethered consciousness, which is essentially when you die, your consciousness becomes untethered from your body and it's allowed to drift into basically this grand ether where there are multiple types of realities that form death. One of these is the ancestral Wakandan plane, which is the ancestral plane, which is where T'Challa and all of the Black Panthers go to upon their death. And we see this in the Black Panther movies, which is the plane with the purple sky and the stars, and it's a field of grass, and then there's the tree, and then in the tree you see the spirits of the former Black Panthers just like, chilling in the tree. I love the fact that that is its own thing, that she references it as its own place that she's visited before, because she says that she absolutely loves it there. I love that. I love the fact that they reference that that's where they go upon their death, because T'Challa also references another location that people go as well, which seems to be separate from the ancestral plane, but maybe it's just a little bit adjacent to it, or it could just be the overall ancestral plane in and of itself, and the piece that we see is the area that the Black Panthers essentially chill. Hey everybody, Sen here with today's sponsor for the video, NordPass. NordPass is a program created by the guys who made NordVPN. It stores all of your passwords in one location of your choosing offline that only you can access. It provides you with an autofill feature for the websites that you've already visited, and it also securely stores your credit card information offline that only you can access away from other people's prying eyes. But in the event that somebody's prying eyes are able to lay their eyes upon that of your information, NordPass will notify you of any data breaches involving your username, your passwords, or even your credit cards. And the best part, NordPass encrypts all of your data, like I said, locally, offline, that only you can access and the NordPass employees can't. If you're interested in trying out NordPass, visit nordpass.com/sen. Information is down in the description. You will get 2 years plus a free month for 50% off. Once again, that is nordpass.com/sen. Now, back to your regularly scheduled program. Number 8, the scales of justice are imbalanced. So, Marc has a lot of trauma that he has to work through. And this episode was basically getting to the emotional core of who Marc Spector actually is. And I'm not a person I don't even pretend to be somebody who sat down and read every single Moon Knight comic. I'm aware of who Moon Knight is, but I couldn't tell you what his best comic book runs are or what his origin story is. I can give you surface details about the character. So it was really interesting to see that his trauma started when he was a child. Like, really started when he was a child. The loss of his brother really lended itself to that very first crack, I feel like, in basically his personality. and the following abuse that he had to deal with emotionally, and then later on we discover physically, from his mother, is what finally just divorced him from reality and ended up cracking his psyche, where he started creating alternate personalities to basically deal with the level of trauma and bullshit that he had to go through. So, speaking of that, number 7, his brother's death. Really wasn't expecting that. I like the fact that in this case, we're Steven. I just realized that the Batman background is there, but oh well, the Batman background is gonna stay. Or maybe it's not gonna stay. We can just like instantaneously flip it, and we're in the void, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. But I like I shouldn't even say that I like the fact. It was really heartbreaking because you get to see the scenario from Steven's perspective, where he's seeing all of these things for the very first time. And you get a more deeper understanding as to not only the type of person that Steven is, but the reason as to why Steven exists. And he kind of ends up having an existential crisis later on that we're going to delve into. But you get to see all of the emotional breaking points for Marc Spector that kind of pushed him in the direction of Khonshu, where basically Khonshu took advantage of him. Because there's even a scene where, moving on to the very next point, which is number 6, Marc becomes Moon Knight. And you see that Khonshu looks into his mind, and he's like, oh, Marc Spector, broken, divided, your mind is fractured, you're perfect. And I was like, that's kind of fucked up. That's kind of fucked up, the fact that, like, you see into this guy's mind, and you see that he's, like, this emotionally damaged individual, and Khonshu's like, perfect, emotionally damaged, that means you're easier to manipulate, my friend. And he basically manipulates Marc, and Marc's dying because Steven and Marc, in their subconscious journey, they end up at the camp that Layla's father died in. And you see Marc sitting at the steps of Khonshu's statue, and he's bleeding out, and he knows he's going to die. So Khonshu basically takes advantage of the fact that Marc's dying, and the fact that he's emotionally compromised, and the fact that his mind is fractured, and he's like, yeah, you'll be the perfect tool, the perfect weapon for me to use to mete out vengeance. And it's like, really? Is this guy really the perfect person for you to use? Or is he just like a simple tool that you can use and then throw away? Which lends a lot of credence to what Harrow was talking about in the previous episode, about the fact that Khonshu basically uses you when he has no longer a use for you. He throws you away, and he preys upon your weakness. And you kind of see in that scene where Marc's before his statue that he's preying on Marc. Like, he's using him 100% across the board. He's preying on his insecurities to make him into his hand of vengeance. And that majorly fucking sucks. It kind of pushes Khonshu into a light where before I thought he was like funny and sarcastic, and I kind of dug him, to the point where I'm like, nah, you kind of lean on the asshole side of things. Where I knew that you were using Marc for the whole, if you don't want to work with me, then I'll just use his daughter type of thing. But would you really have been able to use his daughter? Because you're kind of in the middle of nowhere. His temple is in the middle of nowhere, which means that they had just excavated his temple. Would you really found Layla? I don't think so. I kind of feel as though you kind of roped Marc in, and then once he was falling in love with Layla, you were like, oh, well, if you don't want to be my spirit of vengeance, I'm just going to take your girlfriend. I don't think you got that juice. I feel as though you needed Marc in the state that he was in order to use him. But moving on, number 5. Amit's bullshit has begun. As we see from the way in which it's described, she said that souls are falling into the underworld before it's their time, which means that Amit has already judged them and is sending their souls down into the underworld before they're dead, which is what Khonshu was attempting to warn the gods about. To which I'm like, if this is happening now, shouldn't it be like a 5-alarm fire up there? Shouldn't y'all have already like cracked Khonshu's statue and set him free so he can go back into Marc's body so he can regenerate and get his Moon Knight juices back? Or the gods really just sitting around like, I mean, we're really only here to observe now. There's really no point in attempting to stop one of our more evil gods from basically scoring the face of the planet and wiping out like 80% of the human population, you know, we'll just kick back. We'll just watch this. I'm really hoping that the next episode, which is the last episode, I believe, because I think it's a 6-episode run, really shows what the fuck the gods are doing. Because if they're just sitting around doing nothing, get Gore. Go get Gore right now, drop his ass in the heliopause, and get them all up out of here. Because you know Gore is just gonna he's just gonna I can't wait to see Gore fight Thor. Not even fight Thor. I can't wait to see Gore fight Zeus. Because I already know Gore is just gonna show up and he's just like, Necrosword, clack, Necrosword, clack, Necrosword, clack. Gods falling out the sky. And while he's clapping the cheeks of the Greek gods, he needs to just skip 2 stones over to the Egyptian gods and clap them too for letting this bullshit go down. But moving on, number 4, Marc's child abuse. So I saw it coming. Like before, I don't know why, man. Like dealing with that as a kid as well, I saw the signs on the wall from the really tense dinner scene where like she was basically blaming him that she didn't want to come down and be with him for his birthday, and the fact that she was basically saying that I wish you were dead and your brother had survived, it's your fault that he's gone. I was like, yeah, she's definitely beating him. Like, look at him. He went from like this really happy kid that was like exploring things with his little brother. He seemed as though his extrovertedness just completely went away and he basically became introverted, and he just internalized onto himself. And that internalization is what created Steven. Because you see his name on a poster in his room. And at first I thought it was an Indiana Jones poster, but then they looked at it closely and the adventurer's name is Stephen Grant. And it was kind of like I don't even want to kind of like come to Jesus moment, but you see the personality change because Steven's in the room and Steven's like, I remember this room. This is our bedroom. I don't remember this. And you see Marc, like he's trying to cover his ears because she's pounding on the door and she's trying to get in. And then his eyes roll back into the back of his head and he turns into Steven. And Steven's like, oh no, look how like dirty and everything is in here. And he starts putting it away. And I instantly thought of, what was that movie with James McAvoy? The one where he has the multiple personalities. Why am I forgetting it? Glass was the last one in the series. What was it called? The first one was Unbreakable. The last one is Split. I instantly thought of Split, where in Split, exact same scene. He's hiding underneath the bed, and he creates a persona of the type of child that his mother wants, which is calm, happy, neat freak, basically does as he's told, extremely smart. That's Steven. Steven was basically created so that Marc could escape the abuse. And you kind of feel the lead up to that as Marc was freaking out over the fact that Steven was going to realize the truth, because basically he not only was Steven created to protect Marc was relying on Steven so much that he was attempting to protect Steven from the truth. And we kind of see that in the fact that basically when they're both in the afterlife, they're both walking around completely autonomous of each other. Steven's running through all of these memories, like seeing the past that he's never seen before, and Marc's running like right behind him, trying to catch up to him and stop him from seeing all of these memories. I really, really love the way in which this is handled. It's handled beautifully, absolutely beautifully. Dealing with the fact that he has a fractured mind, the emotional abuse, basically his reconciliation and everything that was going on. Steven discovering that, which is number 3, Steven knowing that he's fake, and finally meeting the Dr. Harrow that Marc has been sitting down and having the therapy sessions with, which the question needs to be asked is Dr. Harrow basically Marc's subconscious trying to ease him in the direction that fuels his mind, or is there something more sinister going on? Because it seems as though that version of Dr. Harrow has basically been pushing Marc and Steven down a path where they're reconciling both of their pasts. Because Steven shows up in the room and he starts calling out like all the fake bullshit on the walls. And as he's calling it out, Harrow sends him, well, not before he even sends him, he shows him the phone and shows him that this entire time when you've been calling your mother, you've just been talking to a dial tone. Like there's been no one on the other end because your mother passed away. And he sends him basically to the point where Marc is sitting out front of his father's house. His mother's passed away. He doesn't want to come inside. And he has another emotional breakdown because he's reliving all of his trauma in the street. And the emotional breakdown is so bad that we finally see the catalyst as to why him and Steven don't have any control over who has control of the body and what's going on. Basically, he wanted to escape so bad, he just relinquished control to Steven, and Steven just went off. And from there, Marc was no longer in control of the body. Steven was, because basically Marc's emotional trauma and bullshit is massive to the point that he suppressed himself and was willing to let Steven be the one just basically in control, and he only wanted to take control when Khonshu wanted to send him on a mission, which now begs the question whether or not Marc was asleep. Because, referencing Split again, when Kevin wakes up, Kevin says that the last thing he remembers, he was on a bus. And when the Horde takes back over, the Horde says that Kevin's asleep. We made him sleep really far away. When we first get introduced to Steven, we never see Marc in the reflection. And we only see Marc in the reflection when he makes himself known to Steven. Like, hey, I can get us out of the situation. I need you to give me control of the body. Before that, it was a really hard switch where the eyes roll back into the head and they start shaking. And you'd only ever see it from Steven's perspective. So I have to wonder if when Marc gave over control to Steven, if he just went to sleep. And he was sleeping the entire time until Khonshu called him. And then when Khonshu called him, that's when he woke up and he basically retook the reins of the body. But by then it was too late. Steven had the body for so long that he essentially had the majority of the control. And then we jump back to the ship, which, oh my god, the ship stuff was really, really dope, because if you've ever played Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, those dudes reminded me of the creatures from the Sands of Time, which is if they drag you off that ship and you land down in the that dune sea of sand, you basically turn into one of them. And it was really dope seeing both Marc and Steven fighting, and I thought at a point in time I thought Marc was going to be the one who went over and Steven went to paradise. But when Steven picked up the bat and he started swinging and he was having too much fun, the death flags went up in the air, and I was like, oh, he's going to be the one that goes over. And sure enough, Steven goes over. And when Steven goes over, the scales balance. And the reason why the scale balances is because Steven is the last bit of Marc's trauma. Which is very interesting that we still haven't seen Jake. Because I'm really wondering what's going on that front. Because there is a scene when they're walking down the corridor and there's a door. And they look in the door and there's a cab and there's a guy standing next to the cab. And Steven's like, yeah, that's you, right? You remember this? And then Marc's like, it's like a cab on the sidewalk. Yeah, that's Jake. But they don't reference him. And it seems as though, I don't know what trauma created Jake, or if they're going to explore what the trauma was that made Jake exist. But it seems as though when Steven went overboard and he hit the sand and he finally died or turned into one of those sand demon things, it seems as though that was Marc basically letting go of the last bit of the trauma that's been affecting him since he was a child, and he was allowed to pass on into paradise. And that's basically number one, which is how Marc ends up in paradise, or the Egyptian equivalent of paradise, which Egyptian paradise is completely different from Wakandan paradise. Because Wakandan paradise is like nighttime, and then there are stars, and then, like I said, there's like the tree, and then there's the sea of green grass, and there are the Black Panthers. Egyptian paradise is like, nah, man. When we said a field of reeds, we meant a field of reeds. It's like a golden plain. And it's like, oh, this place is bright. Which is basically me saying that if I had to choose a paradise I'm going to, send me to the Wakandan paradise, because it's at night. Like, when I'm surfing the internet, my internet is always on dark mode. Like, when I see bright mode, I'm like, what is this? Who operates this way? As soon as he ended up in that bright place, I was like, no, this is a little bit too bright for me. Send me to the Wakandan one. Go ahead and teleport me over there, because I don't know what this is, and I do not like it at all. I'm interested to see where it's going to go next, because now that Marc's basically in paradise, he didn't make it to the gate to go back to his body. So this is going to basically be on Layla and Anshu to resurrect Marc and bring him back so that he's able to basically beat Harrow and stop Ahmet from basically fucking the entire world. But yeah, this is another solid episode of Moon Knight. Absolutely loved it. It was dope as shit. I don't even know if I'm going to be adding clips to this, because usually when I add clips to this, Disney takes a piss. But we'll probably try. We'll see how things work out. But let me know what your favorite part of the episode was. Comment down below, and I will catch you in the next one.